Stay and listen if you are interested in integrating livestock into your farm to drastically cut your weeding costs. We will reveal the most interesting money-saving steps at the very end of this episode. Welcome to this podcast episode brought to you by AGS Agriculture Global Solutions, your partner for better farming practices. Let's look at a very specific listener request we received this week. You reached out and asked us to discuss the integration of chickens and ducks into your farming operations.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question.
It really is, because utilizing the space under your canopy to rear livestock is a concept that is gaining a lot of serious traction right now.
It absolutely is.
And for good reason, right? But we have to start by setting some expectations regarding the literature.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are very few sources of scientific information out there on this specific topic. When we started preparing for this discussion, the data was, well, surprisingly sparse.
Yeah.
We did manage to find two quite old papers on the subject, so we will do our best to describe this topic now based on what we have.
Right. So what are those papers?
We are looking at a Malaysian palm oil board paper, the MPOB, from 2003, which is 23 years old now in 2026.
Wow. Okay.
And an Indonesian study from 2024, which is relatively new. It's just 2 years old.
And it must be noted that although there is some information on the rearing of free-range chickens in these farming environments, there is almost no information on rearing ducks.
None at all, yeah.
None. So we'll use this opportunity to call on the academics working in this field to perhaps put some effort into conducting more investigations on the matter.
Especially now, when regenerative agriculture and circular economy have become such buzz terms in agricultural sciences.
Exactly. We need the actual localized data to back up those concepts.
Precisely. We need proven methodologies, not just academic theories. But look, let's work with the data we do have.
Our focus today is all about maximizing your land use, right? Doing this right unlocks additional income streams, and fundamentally, it reduces your reliance on chemical inputs.
So before we get into the physical setup, the fencing, the birds, the feed, let's discuss the human element.
The human element. Because integrating livestock isn't just a biological shift, is it?
No, it's a structural shift in how your farm interacts with its surroundings.
That brings us perfectly to the 2024 study we reviewed.
Right, the one titled Designing and Analyzing Properties of Socioculture and Perception from Livestock Farmers.
Yes, and I know this study was conducted in West Papua, Indonesia.
It was. And I want to draw some clear, practical parallels to Malaysia here.
Please do.
The tropical climate in West Papua is identical to ours. Furthermore, the smallholder community structures, the social dynamics, and the absolute necessity for undergrowth management are practically mirrored.
So the translation to our local context is pretty direct.
Because of these shared realities, the findings from this study are absolutely still relevant to Malaysia.
Okay, so when we strip away the academic framing from that study, what were the successful farmers actually doing right? I mean, I imagine it's not as simple as just buying a flock of birds and hoping for the best.
Not at all. What really stood out is that agricultural know-how was only half the battle.
Only half.
Yeah, success relied heavily on community support.
Ah, okay.
The study found that a farmer's success is deeply intertwined with having harmonious relationships with local communities and customary land rights owners.
That makes a lot of sense when you think about the physical realities of livestock. If you bring animals onto your block, your neighbors are going to notice.
Oh, they definitely will.
Chickens make noise, they attract flies, they have a distinct smell, and if a fence fails, they will absolutely wander across property lines.
Exactly. And they might also attract predators, like wild dogs or monitor lizards,
Yeah.
which then become a problem for the whole neighborhood.
Right, so the instruction for you, the farmer, is to keep your neighbors informed and involved. Have those conversations early.
Explain the boundaries you are setting up and how you plan to manage the waste and the noise.
It's about managing expectations, fundamentally. What else did the Indonesian study highlight regarding the barriers to entry?
Access to capital was a major factor. Expanding into livestock requires a significant initial investment for infrastructure and the birds themselves.
Right. It's not a cheap weekend project.
No. Successful farmers didn't just borrow money blindly. They deeply understood the terms and risks of business capital loans required to purchase good breeds and proper equipment.
Because it's essentially launching a parallel business on your existing land, you have to treat it with that level of financial scrutiny.
Absolutely.
And what about the demographic split? Did the study find differences in how older versus younger farmers approach this integration?
It did, and it highlighted a fascinating dynamic regarding how knowledge is shared within communities.
How so?
Older farmers brought an immense wealth of traditional wisdom and practical, hard-earned experience in handling livestock. They know animal behavior intuitively.
Yeah, you can't really teach that overnight.
But younger farmers, on the other hand, were found to be much more open to adopting new technologies, modern record keeping, and innovative management practices.
That suggests that you don't need to have all the answers on day one.
Definitely not.
The takeaway here is to partner up or seek mentorship if you are new to rearing animals. If you are a younger farmer, seek out that traditional wisdom to understand the physical realities of the birds.
And if you are an older farmer, listen to the younger generation about new efficiencies and perhaps new ways to track your feed costs.
Quick note, tell us in the comments what oil palm topics you want next so we make episodes on what matters to you. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you are not subscribed yet. Give this episode a like and write a comment. This helps our YouTube channel so we continue transforming oil palm scientific articles into language that is easy to understand and digest.
Now, let's transition from the social aspects to the highly practical mechanical steps of actually setting this up on your land.
Right, let's get our hands dirty.
We are going to base this framework on the guidelines laid out in the 2003 MPOB study.
Let's get into the logistics.
Okay.
Where is the best place to actually start building?
The preparation phase begins with selecting the right block. The very first thing to understand is that this system is proven suitable only for mature palms over 5 years old.
Only over 5 years old. I assume that's because younger palms have much lower fronds that the chickens could easily damage by roosting or pecking?
Yes, that's a big part of it.
And the canopy isn't fully closed yet, meaning the ground might get too hot for the birds during the day.
You hit the nail on the head. You need that established canopy for shade and the structural height to keep the trees safe from the flock.
Okay, so if your block meets that criteria, what's next?
Your first physical task is to clear the excessive undergrowth in your chosen area, and then accurately plan out a 2-hectare block for this project.
All right, we have our 2-hectare block mapped out and cleared. How do we structure the infrastructure within that space? We can't just let a massive flock run wild over 2 full hectares, can we?
Correct. You need controlled rotation. Infrastructure and fencing are your foundation here. The literature recommends constructing 5 equally distributed coops within this 2-hectare area.
Let me do the math on that. If we are distributing 5 coops evenly across a 2-hectare space, that means we are basically creating a grid, and each coop sits exactly at the center of a 0.4-hectare paddock.
Exactly.
Why separate them like that instead of building one giant central coop? It seems like more work.
It's about animal behavior. Chickens will only forage a certain distance from their home base.
Oh, I see.
If you have one massive central coop, they will completely overgraze the immediate surrounding area, leaving the edges of your block untouched by their foraging and their manure.
Ah, right.
Distributing them into 0.4-hectare paddocks ensures even weed management across the entire 2 hectares.
That is brilliant design. And for the fencing and closing these 0.4-hectare paddocks, what materials are we looking at?
You want to build your perimeter and paddock fencing using cheap but strong materials. Plastic and wire netting are proven to work exceptionally well.
Plastic and wire netting. Standard stuff.
But here is a crucial structural detail from the guidelines. You must place a corrugated zinc sheet at the bottom of the fence line.
Why a zinc sheet specifically? Wouldn't just burying the wire mesh deep into the groundwork to stop things from getting in?
Burying wire mesh helps, sure. But a determined monitor lizard, a snake, or a wild dog can eventually dig or push through wire.
That makes sense.
A corrugated zinc sheet acts as a solid, smooth barrier. Predators cannot grip it to climb, and they generally won't try to dig under a solid metal wall in the same way they will dig at a porous wire fence.
It is a vital, low-cost protective measure to deter predators then.
Yes.
Beyond the paddocks themselves, what other logistical infrastructure do we need on site?
You need to install a container cabin on the block.
A whole container cabin?
Yes. This is strictly for the secure, dry storage of your feed and your equipment.
Ah, to protect the investment.
Exactly. Leaving feed bags exposed to the humidity or to rats is a recipe for disaster. Furthermore, you'll need to construct a groundwater well if you do not already have a reliable, clean water supply piped directly to that block.
Because hydration is non-negotiable for flock health.
Totally non-negotiable.
So the paddocks are built, the coops are in place, we have our feed cabin and our water supply. Now, let's talk about populating the farm. How do we buy the birds?
The smartest approach is the batch system.
The batch system.
You do not want to buy your entire flock on day one. You introduce 1,000 day-old chicks at a time.
And we are referring to day-old chicks as DOC from here on out.
Right, DOC. So you do this regularly every single month, bringing in a new batch of DOC to a new paddock.
That makes total business sense. Staggering them means you aren't overwhelmed by feed costs all at once.
Yes.
And it guarantees you have a continuous monthly harvest later on rather than one massive bottleneck at the market.
Exactly. It stabilizes your cash flow. Now, when purchasing, you must buy from reputable suppliers. Do not look for the cheapest option.
Good advice.
Ensure they are vaccinated against Marek's disease before they are even shipped to your farm.
We should define that because Marek's disease is no joke.
No, it's brutal.
It is a highly contagious viral infection that attacks the nervous system of the birds. In a dense, humid environment with 1,000 birds sharing the same space, an airborne virus like Marek's can easily wipe out your entire investment in a matter of days.
It truly is devastating. The vaccination is an absolute requirement.
So we have healthy, vaccinated DOC on the way. Let's look at the coop preparation.
Right. Before the delivery truck of DOC arrives, you need to prep their environment. Place a 12-centimeter layer of wood chippings on the floor of the coop.
12 centimeters is quite a deep layer.
It is.
I assume that's to manage the heavy moisture and absorb the ammonia from their droppings, keeping the floor sanitary.
Yes, it provides vital insulation from the ground and keeps the environment dry. Once the floor is prepped, you need to build 4 brooding enclosures inside each coop.
How exactly do we build a brooding enclosure? What does that look like?
You construct them using thin, flexible plywood. They should be 60 centimeters high and formed into a circle with a 1.5-meter diameter.
Okay, to help visualize that, you want to build circular enclosures about knee-high, roughly 1.5 meters across. Basically, picture building 4 large kiddie pools inside the main coop.
That's a great way to picture it. Inside each of these circular enclosures, you must equip them with a gas brooder for a localized heat source, a hurricane lamp for light, and 8 water and feed troughs.
So we are creating a tightly controlled, safe microenvironment for the highly vulnerable chicks.
Precisely.
So the big day arrives, the truck pulls up, and you are offloading 1,000 DOC into these 4 enclosures. What is the protocol for those crucial first few hours?
It requires meticulous patience. Let the newly arrived DOC rest for a full hour in those brooding enclosures before doing anything else.
It's so tempting to just dump feed in front of them immediately because you know they are hungry, but they've just survived a highly stressful transport. Their systems are in overdrive.
Exactly. If you overwhelm their digestive systems immediately, you will see a spike in mortality.
Right.
After that hour of quiet rest, give them water mixed with anti-stress vitamins to help stabilize them.
Just water and vitamins first.
Yes. Then, wait another full hour before finally adding moistened feed to the troughs. You are gently waking their systems up.
How long do they stay confined inside these small circular plywood enclosures?
You remove the plywood brooding enclosures when the chicks are 5 to 7 days old. By this point, they are stronger and need more space.
But they still stay inside the coop.
They still remain strictly inside the main coop walls, yes, but they now have the run of the entire wood-chipped floor.
When did they finally get to experience the outdoors and start doing the actual weeding work for us in the paddocks?
That ranging phase begins later. You keep the chicks inside the coop until they're 10 to 12 days old.
They need those initial weeks to build core strength and feather out slightly to handle the outdoor climate, I imagine.
Yes, after they hit that 10 to 12 day mark, you begin releasing them into the 0.4 hectare paddocks during the daytime.
So the daily routine shifts.
The daily routine becomes open the doors to let them range in the morning, and herd them back into the safety of the coop every single night to protect them from predators and weather.
So we repeat this daily routine batch after batch. When do we actually reach the finish line for a batch? When is the harvest?
You will harvest and sell the mature chickens when they are 13 to 15 weeks old.
Okay.
At this stage, you are aiming for them to be between 1.5 to 2.0 kilograms in body weight.
Why strictly 13 to 15 weeks? Why not hold on to them until they are 20 weeks old so they get even bigger?
Because of the feed conversion ratio. After 15 weeks, the amount of feed they consume vastly outpaces the amount of weight they gain.
So your feed costs will quickly eclipse the market value of the meat.
Furthermore, for the premium free-range market, if the bird gets too old, the meat becomes too tough. 1.5 to 2.0 kilograms is the sweet spot for profitability and quality.
Let's pull back and look at the whole farm ecosystem now. We've talked about the cash from selling the meat, but the agronomic benefits are where this system really pays for itself, right?
Without a doubt. During that daytime ranging, Those chickens will aggressively consume grasses and weeds within their paddocks. They are relentless foragers.
I love that.
The MPOB data notes a staggering statistic. After running just 2 batches of chickens through a paddock, you can potentially save 100% of your weeding costs.
Slashing your weeding budget to zero just by letting the livestock execute their natural behavior, that is the definition of a circular economy.
It really is.
And obviously, while they are eating those weeds, they are leaving something highly valuable behind.
Yes. The thousands of chickens produce droppings that act as an excellent continuous source of organic fertilizer.
They are essentially tiny little fertilizer spreaders.
They are constantly distributing this biological input right across your root zones as they forage. Over time, this natural fertilization eventually helps to boost your overall yield in tons per hectare, deeply improving the biological health of your soil profile. By the way, soil testing for acidity and nutrient content is essential, and leaf testing can help you accurately adjust your fertilizer inputs when adding organic manure.
You want to be certain you are balancing the organic nitrogen and phosphorus from the chickens with your crop's exact physiological needs.
Exactly right.
That brings up a great point about modern management. We are talking about tracking soil chemistry, feed costs, rotation schedules, and yields across a complex biological system.
There's a lot to manage.
You can't really just guess your way through precision agriculture. This is where modern tools, specifically integrating artificial intelligence, completely changes how a farm operates. We will just refer to it as AI going forward.
It truly does. Managing livestock rotations alongside complex soil health and nutrient inputs requires tracking an enormous amount of variables.
So how do we simplify that?
Farmers can register on cropdrive.ai. This innovative AI guides fertilization and soil health step by step, and Palmyra answers questions step by step.
What I find so impressive about it is that it was built by an international team specifically for Malaysian smallholders. It is completely unique worldwide, and it costs a tiny fraction of what you would pay a traditional agronomist or consultant to come out and run these diagnostics for you.
Exactly. We strongly encourage you to join the hundreds of Malaysian smallholders who are already using CropDrive to raise their income and actively cut their operational costs.
And since we just discussed the critical importance of lab soil and leaf results, it is worth stating that CropDrive helps interpret them, removing the guesswork from balancing your chicken manure inputs with your palm's needs.
It perfectly bridges the gap between traditional livestock integration and modern agronomy.
So as we wrap up today's discussion, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Tomorrow, walk your block and visualize exactly where a 0.4-hectare paddock could fit between your mature palms. Check your local market prices for a 2-kilogram free-range chicken. Could this circular economy approach be the key to zero weeding costs on your farm? Remember to visit our AI farming assistant at cropdrive.ai to learn more on how to increase your oil palm yields and incomes. Thanks for listening.